You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson, and we got three big segments to get into this afternoon. We're going to talk about 2024, what could be deemed as a success? How can the Royals be more competitive? That'll be in our first segment. Secondly, I want to know where Asa Lacy is, and is it time to start calling him a bust, or is there still time to turn things around? And lastly, I do have some big-time concerns with Nick Pratto and his fit in the future in Kansas City. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You can also check us out on all those podcasting platforms like Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. You can ask any questions there in the comment page, or you can just reach out to me on Twitter. Again, Twitter handle is at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to today's title sponsor in Sleeper. If you are into fantasy baseball, Sleeper is the app to use. And I have a couple of picks I'm going to give you involving the Royals game today, a series finale against the Cleveland Guardians. So keep an eye out for that here in about 10 to 15 minutes. What I wanted to do to open up the show today is take a little bit of a peek into the future here. Look into that crystal ball and maybe hope and dream a little bit about the 2024 Kansas City Royals. Now, I think with this team, I'm never going to say it can't get worse, to channel my Buddy Bell energy here, because every time I feel like it can't get any worse than this, it can't be this bad of a rotation. It can't be this bad of a bullpen. It can't be this bad of a lineup. They always continue to surprise me. They always continue to shock me. So, I'm not getting caught up in hopeful things, optimistic things for 2023. But I always think in seasons like this, it's all right to take a glimpse into the future and see what could be. And I think I, for one, am very intrigued, excited to see what this front office does or doesn't do in the offseason, because I think they felt more heat than ever. And especially once this team breaks the franchise record for losing in a single season, that is, I think we're really going to see what this front office, what this ownership group is all about, right? If they sit on their hands again, I don't think they're going to get any support next year. I don't think you'll have a good crowd on opening day. I think you're going to have those boycotted type games. It sounds severe, but there's going to be fans out there with the paper bags on their heads. I mean, if you don't do anything, I think you're going to cause 70% of the fan base to become irate. Right now, they're furious. I'd say 70% is irate. The other 30% angry to frustrated. You're not going to have anybody on your side if after a season in which you lose 115 to 120 games, you just sit on your hands. So I wanted to take a look at 2024 and ask myself, what would be a success, right? Because I think you don't want to get too caught up in win totals here. Like I said in an earlier podcast this week, the 2003 Detroit Tigers lost 119 games. They were 43-119. The following year, they improved their win total by 29 games. They won over 70, and yet they lost over 90 games. And to me, that's not by any stretch a successful season. It would feel a lot different than this team. I mean, just think about it. The 2021 Royals, who went 72-90, or was it 75-87? Might have been 72-90. Can't quite remember. It was in that ballpark of 72-75. They felt a lot different than any other team since 2017, because early on, were they the best record going into May, was it? They were fun early on. Never were a great team, but they were more competitive. And I wondered myself, is that something I would be on board with next year if it meant, You win 75 games, but then you drop in the draft order. And is that really going to help you a bunch? At the same time, I don't know if I'm willing to go through another season anything like this, remotely like this. This has been the most painful year of baseball I think I've ever watched. And maybe what's worse about it, like the one thing about the 2005 Royals, the 04 Royals, those 06, 07, 08 teams, you just knew they were bad, right? You just knew going into the year there wasn't much to build around. You had your mainstays. You had your David DeJesus's. You had your Mike Sweeney's. You had your Zach Greinke's. You had your Mark Teens there, your John Bucks, your Mark Gredzalonic some year. And then from time to time, they'd add a piece or two, a Mike Jacobs, a Coco Crisp, a Rick Ankiel. They added guys, just really as stopgap guys, but they were always bad. This is that nobody could have envisioned this team being this bad. I think we knew they were going to be bad, but to lose over 110, that is something to me that is really just, you can't wrap your mind around it. I can't even find the words to it. That a team built like this could lose this much. So I look ahead to 2024 and go, all right, what would be a successful season? What gets me back up and extremely optimistic about the future? What gets me, energized again? What gets me believing in this coaching staff, in this front office, in this ownership group? Well, I think it starts in the offseason, right? If you lose 117, let's say the Royals end their season at 45-117, they would shatter the single season losing record by 11 games. All right, you go into the offseason, and we've discussed this before. You go into the offseason, I'm going to extend one guy. It's going to be either Bobby Witt Jr., Maikel Garcia, Vinny Pasquantino. You pick one of those guys, and you say, okay, they're going to be the guy that we try and build around for the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. I think everybody would pick Bobby Witt Jr. I said Vinny Pasquantino because he's going to be consistent, but you just got to pick one. And when I mean extension, that doesn't mean you're giving him an 8-9 year deal. Like you could extend Maikel Garcia 4-year deal. If he'd be willing to accept that, a 4-year deal, maybe give him somewhere in the ballpark of a 4-year, $40 million. That may even be highballing it a little bit for a guy with one true year of major league experience under his belt. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be asking for more than that because he knows he's a perennial superstar if he puts everything together. Vinny Pasquantino, kind of the same ballpark as Maikel Garcia. He had the shoulder problems, so that could scare you away. But I think you find a way to extend one of those three. All right, that's step one for me. Now, I know this would be happening at the end of 2023, but it's setting the 2024 team up for maybe more success. Then I'm going out there and I am gutting, and I mean absolutely gutting everybody in that bullpen and a large chunk of that rotation. I'm gutting it. I thought it was a great tweet. I can't remember who it was from, but it was involving the Cincinnati Reds. And back in 2021, they had 32 different pitchers throw at least one pitch for Cincinnati. There is one remaining guy from 2021 on this team who is battling for a National League Central title. It's Lucas Sims, who's one of their better bullpen guys. One guy. The Royals have 11 guys, I believe it is, on the 40-man roster from 2021. Pitchers, that is. They had 9 guys who threw a pitch in 2021 that have also thrown a pitch, or it might have been 10 guys, I believe, that have thrown a pitch in 2023. Be more cutthroat. The bullpen's been terrible. I'm gutting it. All right. I'm replacing it with waiver claims in the offseason, minor trades, and maybe adding one guy to the rotation. 2-year deal. Doesn't need to be overspending. Can't have another Jordan Lyles, but you go out there and you get a Martin Perez on a discount. Maybe you break bank a little bit and get a Jordan Montgomery. That seems a bit far-fetched. Maybe Lance Lynn. You try to find somebody who could be the number one because you don't have a single number one in that rotation. All right, so you assemble that group pitching-wise. I'm gutting the bullpen. I am finding everybody from other organizations to fill that bullpen for next year. Seems dire, but I think we know where we're at right now. So I'm going to revamp the bullpen with completely new guys. I'm adding one guy to the rotation. All right, I'm adding one guy because I think there's a need to spend a bunch of money, just throw it all in the rotation for a team that's not going to win a lot of games. Okay, so you try to find a guy you could flip at the deadline. Maybe it's a Lance Lynn, maybe it's a Martin Perez. We'll wait and see on that. As for the outfield, I know I kind of jumped the gun here, but for the lineup here, I'm having Maikel Garcia at third. I'm having Bobby Witt Jr. at short. Probably Vinny Pasquantino at first. I'm going to DH Salvi. I'll put Freddie Fermin at catcher. I think I'm going to spend a little bit in the outfield. I don't think there's a single guy that I would realistically plug in there to be an everyday outfielder. Maybe Drew Waters. I could put Drew Waters in center and go get 2 corner outfield bats. One guy I love that's going to be available, depending on his price, Kevin Kiermaier. Always thought he was going to be a Royal in the future. Great defense. Had just a fine year with Toronto. I think you can get him on a 1-year deal. He's reaching his mid-30s, but still, great defensive center fielder, good bat. I'd like him in that lineup. And one guy I think that's going to get a bit of a payday, but could be a discount depending how he closes out the year. He can be a bit of a clubhouse issue. I know that he had the incident with Jock Peterson, but Tommy Pham has been fantastic this year. And for a corner outfield bat, I would be all over that. You just need more stability in the lineup. And if you do that, this team, I think, kind of becomes the 2021 Royals. They win 71 games. They win 72. And I guarantee you, you feel night and day different about a 72-win team than you do for a 45-win team. That would be improving their win total by, 27 games? I think I'd take that. That, to me, would be a success. It starts with the front office and the general manager and J.J. Piccolo and saying, hey, we do want to show the fan base we can spend some money. Earn that trust back, all right? You want to know another way you can earn the trust back? Extend somebody. Invest a little bit in your future. Do it with one of the 3 guys I mentioned. Then you got to be cutthroat. You also want to earn the respect of the fan base. Nobody in that bullpen, except for Carlos Hernandez, really deserves to be back in this bullpen next year. And I think that you could either trade Carlos Hernandez in the offseason and go completely gutting it, 1-year minor league deals, try to flip guys, work with them in the offseason, and build the bullpen that way. There's not many guys I want to see back from that bullpen. But that, to me, would be a successful 2024, showing the aggression, being more transactional, more so than you were this year. I know it wasn't much, but really trying to lean into this is how modern day baseball is played. It's how it's operated. You need to be more cutthroat. You need to invest in one of these guys. You need to build a lineup that can at least be bottom 10. I know it sounds bad to say, not worst. Like you can get to the 20th level, 20, 21st, 22nd best offense in the league. I'm not going to complain. It's not great, but it's not as bad as it's been right now. Same thing with the rotation. You get to 19, 20, 21. I'm fine with that. Involving American and National League, that's just a fine mark for me in the second year of the rebuild. But that, to me, is how you build a successful 2024. Do not go anywhere because we want to talk about a prospect, or at least a former prospect, that I have no idea where he's at. Now, yesterday we said, is the 2018 draft class a failure? Let's ask the question for Asa Lacy. Is he already a bust from that 2020 draft class? That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we talk a little bit about Asa Lacy, let's give a shout out to today's title sponsor in Sleeper. If you're into fantasy baseball, this is the app that you need to use. This is the app that I use. It's fun to make those picks. And I got a couple picks for you today involving the Kansas City Royals and the Cleveland Guardians. Now, the first one I'm going to go with here, it's going to involve Alec Marsh. I think he gets his strikeout numbers back today a little bit. I'm going to take over 5.5 for Alec Marsh. I'm not expecting him to have the numbers he had against Tampa. I'm not expecting him to have big-time numbers like he did against Minnesota with the strikeout totals, but I think he gets back on track here. I think he can get around 6 strikeouts in this game against the Cleveland lineup that I'm just not overly impressed with. Then I think I'm also going to give another pick for Gavin Williams today, throwing against the Royals offense. I think I'm going to take Gavin Williams, like Marsh, have a big strikeout total day. I'm going to go with 6.5 and take the over there for Gavin Williams throwing for the Cleveland Guardians. Now, with Sleeper, do you want to win 100 times your money on daily fantasy baseball? Sleeper is now offering up to 100 times the payout for up to 8-pick contest. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win big. There's always this problem with Royals prospects that either they fool us early on, they pitch really well, And then they get to the big leagues and they falter, right? Yeah, Jackson Kowar is a perfect example. Or they go the other way. And that other way is just never becoming anything, never even coming close to getting to Kansas City. And one guy, kind of like Jackson Kowar, that I'm just not going to be able to figure out, to pigeonhole really, is Asa Lacy. Right back in 2020, when the Royals had the 4th overall pick. Now, I'm seeing how the board was falling. And Baltimore seemingly reached with a big-time underslot in Heston Kjerstad, who now, of course, is a top 100 prospect, going to be in Baltimore pretty soon, maybe by the end of this year. Miami reached a little bit, going with Max Meyer. And then you get to that spot with Kansas City. And you're thinking, man, they could really get Austin Martin here. It was going to be Austin Martin for me because I thought he would be the quickest fast track to the big leagues, but even Austin Martin's struggling right now. And then there was Asa Lacy, who all the scouts just raved about, big strikeout numbers. I mean, by far and away, he was the ace. And the Royals had built up their rotation down to the minor league level, and it was, okay, you have Brady Singer coming up now, Chris Bubich, but these guys are going to be number 3s and number 4s. Okay, so you build your rotation with number 2s and number 3s and number 4s. Then you go and get that ace, that workhorse, that 200-inning, 200 strikeout guy. And when the Royals took Asa Lacy, I was ecstatic because I had seen some of his games at Texas A&M, a little bit herky-jerky, but the stuff was electric. I mean, he was virtually unhittable. And in that COVID year, the shortened year, again, he was unhittable. But the Royals take him, and you think, this is a guy that could be up in Kansas City by 2022. He could be on the opening day roster by 2022. How quickly they move Brady Singer and Chris Bubich and Daniel Lynch and Jackson Kowar. He could be that guy. And that was my thought process, that when they made that pick, they were setting him up to be the ace. He was going to be the Greinke, right? He was going to be the guy that you showed up to the ballpark for. When Asa Lacy was on the bump, I mean, his name was perfect for it. Ace Lacy. I mean, I know we called Jordano Ventura Ace, but it was just a play on with his name. Like, it was setting up to be just a perfect relationship. Big time pitcher, big stuff, big lefty, power lefty. And now we sit here 3 years later and he's not even throwing. He can't shake the injury bug. And Royals beat reporters, Andy Rogers, have gotten this question. My good friend Preston Farr has gotten this question. Royals Farm Report on Twitter has gotten this question of just where is he? What can we expect from Asa Lacy? And the problem is there's few updates. There really is few updates with this kid. And I don't know at what point you just say it's a hard reset. You can't really give him a roster spot. I know it's the minor league level, but it's not on the 40-man, nothing like that. But it is starting to become very concerning that this can happen with a top 5 pick. Like, you look at Asa Lacy's numbers, okay, he is now at 24 years old. So he just turned 24 54 days ago. He has not thrown a single pitch this year. The last time he was pitching, it was at AA Northwest Arkansas, where he had an 11.25 ERA. He had walked 42 guys in, 28 guys in 20 innings. He had walked 42 on the season over 28 innings last year. So going back to when he was drafted, he had appeared in Quad Cities in 2021. He didn't pitch in that COVID year, of course, so there's no minor league level. He threw 52 innings for Quad Cities in 2021. 5.19 ERA. He walked over 7 guys per nine, big strikeout numbers. Then he had a stint in the Arizona Fall League. That was all right. That was probably the best he'd ever looked. He was striking out north of 17 guys per nine, had 15 Ks and 7 2/3. Then it was disastrous in 2022. 10.61 ERA. His whip was just under 2. He had walked over 13 guys per nine. I mean, you can't even really figure it out. And over his minor league career, he has only thrown 80 innings, going back to 2021. 80 innings. He's made 19 starts. His whip is well above the league average, 1.713. He has walked 83 guys in 80 innings. And he's injured. He's injury prone. That's one thing here. If he was out there pitching, maybe I'd feel differently. I feel worse that Asa Lacy's not even out there because you don't even know if he can improve. And even if he does improve, can he stay healthy? So I know that the question here is, where is Asa Lacy? Nobody knows. He's still trying to rehab, work off these injuries. And that to me is starting to bring up the scary question, but it's asked for everybody. Is he already a bust? He's 24. You have guys at the major league level now that are pitching at 21 and 22 and 23 and are excelling at the big league level. So if Asa Lacy ever gets there, is he 26? Is he 27? I mean, this is a top 5 pick you're talking about. A top 5 pick. A college arm at that. It can't take you 5 to 6 years to get to the big league level. It just can't. And these are picks, like, the frustrating thing is this was not a bad pick at the time by the Royals. This was the best left-handed arm in the draft. He had big numbers. He was great at A&M. Now the walk numbers are still a bit of a concern, but the strikeout numbers you couldn't ignore. It was, at the time, my favorite pick over the last couple of years for the Royals. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. was number 1, but maybe, Asa Lacy's number 2 there. I had to jump the gun there. But to me, he felt like the perfect ace, the build of a starter. Power lefty, big strikeout numbers. Just a very catchy name. It seemed like the perfect relationship, and now we sit here, we don't even know where he is. We don't know if he's rehabbing in Surprise. We don't know if he's even close to return. Is he going to pitch this offseason? We have not heard anything aside from a couple of answered questions over the last couple months. It's a really unfortunate, tough situation for Asa Lacy. Again, I hope the best for him. I hope he gets right. I hope he gets healthy and he gets another shot. But when it's a business, it's the big league level, it's the minor league level. It's about, seeing who really can be a long-term fit. And I'm sure that doubt is starting to creep in a little bit as if he can be a future fit for this team. All right, before we go, I want to talk about Nick Pratto. I am starting to get a bit concerned that Nick Pratto can be a future fit here in Kansas City. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we wrap up our show today, let's dive a little bit into Nick Pratto here. And he is a guy that I really have always rooted for. I had seen the upside, even when they took him back in the 2017 draft and saw him a little bit in spring training, I think, in 2018 and 19. And really, to me, he is a success story because at one point, it was looking like another failure first-round pick for the Royals. But he turned things around. J.J. Picollo was overseeing that entire minor league group. You have Drew Saylor, Alex Zumwalt working with the young hitters, and he and MJ Melendez go from lost hitters in high A Wilmington to getting up to Kansas City and showing that they can be, a big-time prospect. But now we sit here with Nick Pratto, still young, 24 years old, and it has been an improvement this year. That's what I do want to get at here first things first. He has been an improvement. Last year, it was really tough. Power numbers have dipped a little bit back down, but last year's triple slash was 184, 271 with a slug of 386 and OPS of 657. 7 bombs, 20 RBIs. He struck out 66 times and 182 plate appearances over 49 games. This year, Nick Pratto has played in 77 games. His triple slash is 237, 325 with a 377 slug and OPS of 703. He struck out, though, 109 times in 295 plate appearances. And that always seems to be what makes me hesitate about Nick Pratto being a long-term fit. If you are going to strike out that much, if you are going to strike out looking a lot, and you're going to really lean into being this home run, walk, or strikeout guy, well, the power's got to be there. The power has to be showing a little bit more than it is right now. And the defense, as good as he's been, has to be even better. And here's why there's a bit of a roster crunch and why I'm going to have these concerns. Next year, Vinny Pasquantino is going to be fully healthy. And Vinny Pasquantino, in his short amount of time at the big level, has proven that he could be a future Silver Slugger, a future All-Star. He could be that. I don't want to really make this comparison, but that Billy Butler on the bad Royals teams with probably more power than Billy had, but a guy that you just could count on to be a middle of the bat lineup or middle of the lineup bat, excuse me. Big pop, big power. Very, I would say, very attractive to any lineup out there. He's very personable. He's relatable. And to me, Vinny Pasquantino is that. And the Royals, I think if they had to pick, would pick Vinny Pasquantino. But now you have this dilemma. If Salvador Perez is on the roster next year, which I believe he's going to be unless there's some trade here in the next coming days, Salvador Perez is going to be there. And Salvador Perez is going to be nearing his mid-30s, or he's actually going to be in his mid-30s. Then you have Vinny Pasquantino, then you have Nick Pratto. How do you want to construct this line? All right. I don't really want to see Salvador Perez behind the plate 100 games a year. And that's even overselling it to me. I think he can play maybe half the games behind the plate. You want to get those power numbers back, the offensive surge back, the health back. You probably just have him sit the bench and DH. Okay, so if Salvi's going to DH, then that means Vinny Pasquantino's got to play first base. That's the only position he can play. Nick Pratto has shown he can play the outfield, but not very well. And then it comes down to, is MJ Melendez on the team next year? And if he is, then how are you going to handle an outfield with Nick Pratto and MJ Melendez, a catcher and a first baseman playing corner outfield spots at the big league level? That doesn't feel like a recipe for success. That doesn't feel like a winning formula. And that's why I think Nick Pratto might be in this limbo, if you will, between kind of being a platoon bat and being a fourth outfielder, really. I mean, if Salvi's on this team, Salvi's going to be in the lineup. They're not going to put Salvador Perez on the bench. And if they wanted to take the approach of, hey, he's getting older, let's take him off his feet a bit, he's got a DH. And Vinny Pasquantino has to play first base because he's a better offensive threat than Perez and Pratto. So do you put Pratto in the outfield? I don't think his bat's good enough to have that defense out there in left field. That's we've said this about MJ Melendez. You cannot be that bad in the outfield and not make up for it at the plate, right? You just can't have that. If you're great defensively, like Kyle Isbell, another perfect example, great in the outfield, great defensively. He's not good at the plate, but he can be valuable because he's that good defensively in center field. Now, MJ Melendez and Nick Pratto, they are in this difficult situation because when you are a struggling young player, something has to go right. You have to be good at the plate or you have to be good in the field to give you that confidence. And right now, Nick Pratto is severely slumping. MJ Melendez is slumping, and they both can't play the corner outfield spot. And the Royals, I think, have to understand we can't use next year as another evaluation year if these guys are fits. So that's why I have concerns. Now, if Nick Pratto goes lights out here for the end of the year, and he really takes that big surge and, his WRC plus goes above league average, you're looking at his OPS, you're looking at his batting average on balls in play, you're looking at a walk rate, all of that, and it really improves. Then, okay, you have something you can work with here. Maybe you do keep Salvi behind the plate. Maybe you trade Salvi. You have Vinny at DH and Pratto at first base, and you go on from there. But if it doesn't improve, you're going to have to ask yourself a hard question. Is he really a long-term fit? He'll be going into year 3. How much longer can you wait on he's still young, he needs to figure it out? I think that time is coming up for a lot of players, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, I think that is going to be coming up here on guys like Nick Pratto, MJ Melendez, on Michael Massey, on Kyle Isbell, and on Drew Waters. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And don't forget to check us out on all those podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Also, check us out on YouTube as well. Just be sure to hit that subscribe button. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.